we had a baby in Costa Rica. What was that like?
Yes, we did. Well, I would say pregnancy. I mean, like if you've got it, no matter where you are, that's a tough one.
Hey everyone, welcome to Expat Diaries podcast, where we are interviewing the amazing people who've made the journey from their home country to Costa Rica, and they've decided to move there, relocate there, start businesses there. And we just want to know everything about their journey. All of us are on a different path, and I am just always so intrigued by what brings people here and what keeps them here. And then when they're here, what do they do? And what are they becoming part of a community? Are they helping other people? And so whenever I spoke with Zach, I learned so much about him and Anna and what their path was to get here. And I'm just so excited to share it with you guys. So first of all, welcome, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I found super interesting was that tell me where you were at before you decided Costa Rica was it.
It's kind of a long story.
It's okay.
So we both worked for NGOs in East Africa.
That's where we met. We met working for the same company in Kenya.
She actually did. She was a big boss and I was a lowly associate, and it was maybe slightly inappropriate.
No, it wasn't.
Well, you made the rules. So, but we lived in East Africa, so we met in Kenya, and then we moved to Rwanda. And then in March 2020, we were going to the U.S. for 2 weddings. We were just going to be there for like 10 days. And as we were on the plane on the runway in Rwanda, the borders all started shutting down.
Oh, wow.
And so we got to the U.S., and the first wedding went fine. And there was like one grandparent who couldn't come because of COVID. And then the next wedding was the next day in San Francisco, and it was canceled. And so then we were stuck in the U.S. for a year. We had each brought like 4 pairs of underwear and 2 wedding outfits.
Wow.
And over that period, so we were in the U.S., we just kind of moved around. And over that period, we probably, like a lot of people, reevaluated what we wanted to be doing, where we wanted to be. And that led to the genesis of creating Start Abroad and moving to Costa Rica. And you can maybe tell them why.
Why Costa Rica?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we had each been living abroad for over a decade at that point and had lived in 5 different countries each, some overlapping. And so, after being back in the United States for a full year, we decided, I don't think this is for us. I think we want to get back to outside of the U.S., living in another country. Where should we go? Mm-hmm. We wanted to be on U.S. time zones.
For the business.
Yep, for the business that we started, Start Abroad. We also both spoke some Spanish, so we wanted to be in a Spanish-speaking country. We wanted to be relatively close to the U.S., so it would be easy to see family. And so we had a short list. We were thinking about Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica ended up winning out. The finalists were Colombia, which Zach was championing, and Costa Rica, which was my choice. And I did win, largely because of the safety and the just appreciation of nature in this country. It's so beautiful.
So when we decided to move here, Anna had never been.
You've never been here.
I had never been. Zach had been a few times.
But we didn't know where in Costa Rica we wanted to settle. Mm-hmm. And so the plan, we'd done a bunch of research. We knew we wanted a few different things. And so we picked 5 towns that we were going to go spend a weekend each and just work. Trying to take off the vacation glasses, trying to see what life would actually be like there.
Right.
Assumed, like a lot of people, we were going to end up on the beach. So we went to Uvita first. We went to Playa Grande. We went to Samara. I loved them, but it was hot for us. Mm-hmm. And it was dry season, so it was brown in a lot of the places.
Especially in Guanacaste.
Oh,
and so then we were coming up to the lake area to Nuevo Arenal to spend, I think, the 4th of the 5 weeks. And as we were driving up the hill, the temperature dropped 10 degrees, everything turned green, the lake spreads out before you. We kind of took a deep breath and we're like, oh.
This is nice.
This is nice, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we weren't sold on it 100%, so we rented for a month. And then we decided to rent for a year. And then we bought a home here last year.
Yeah. So we're settled in.
So we're here. Yeah.
So you guys are in the Arenal area?
That's
we're in Nuevo Arenal.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Nice. And are you in a community, or did you buy somewhere out a little bit further away from humanity, or?
We're pretty close into town. So it's like I say 15 minutes
I
with
say 10-minute
access, 10
walk.
minutes to walk into the center of town. Depends on how long your legs are, I guess.
This was a big. We looked at like 50 different properties when we were deciding on when we were looking for a home, and we had a baby in December, and so it was really important for us to find a home or like have a home before the baby came. And
Right.
so there was actually like pressure and stress around finding a place, and one of my key requirements was to be relatively close to town because we had house sitted for a house that was outside of town, and because we worked from home and because we were going to have a baby, it felt very isolating.
Mm,
And even like, R&L already is like pretty remote from a lot of different things. So
for
for me, it
sure.
was very important closer to town.
You just
So
have
tell me.
more. I mean,
No, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I think the really nice thing about living in a small town is that just by going out and about in town,
Mhm.
everybody knows.
Yeah.
You run into all these people who are saying hello and, small talk, chat, catch up with people. I think both of us really appreciate that about where we live.
It makes it feel like you're part of the community just when you go buy
Right.
milk and you see 4 people you know.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that when I talk to people that have come there, one of the things that they have sought out that we've lost in the US so much is that sense of community. And I can tell you, I've lived in my neighborhood in the US for 13 years. And when you come into my subdivision, there's only one road in, and then all of the rest of them are just cul-de-sacs within there. So like we really are kind of a gated community without the gate to drive through. But I don't know my neighbors. Like I know, this will sound really weird, but I had a neighbor across the street from me that he died. And so I never knew his wife. And so they'd go, "Hey, where does this dog belong?" And I go, "Oh, it belongs to dead guy's wife." And that's what I called her. She's dead guy's wife. And then there's the neighbor, there's a lady in the middle, and I know her because her son, I know her name because her son graduated high school with my son. So I know that they are the Warrenches. And then on the other side is the grumpy old neighbor who walks her dogs and lets them poop in the street. In the street. And so like I know them like that, right? But like we're not a community. We don't all come together and do a thing. I don't know their names other than the Warrenches because I knew the son. I don't know their first names. I just know they're the Warrenches. 13 years I've lived across the street from these people. Literally.
It's something that we value about here. It's one of the reasons we chose a small community. We have like a wonderful expat and Tico community. It's very tight knit here, which was important for us. To give you an idea, so our neighbors will just like come in the house to see the baby, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And we have 2 street dogs we've adopted, and everyone in town knows them. And so when one of them goes and says like hello to somebody in town, they'll take a picture and send it to us.
That's
So
awesome.
really like looked after.
It is so special. Also, in terms of places to raise a kid, it's really wonderful to have that sense of like other people in the community are going to be looking out for your kid.
For sure. You know, it's funny because whenever I was growing up in California, our neighborhood was like that. And I knew that if I did something wrong, the lady across the street from me, her name is Marilyn Dotson, would whoop my butt. Like I never had any thought that my neighbors had the right to discipline me at any time. If my mom was not there watching and she was like at work and I was running wild like the heathen that I was, I better do it so that Marilyn didn't see me because she would kick my rear. Absolutely. Like I probably get more whoopings from Marilyn than I did my own mom. Like she was just like, "Get in here. I'm going to tan your hide. You know better than do that." Like it was just given. And so I love that sense of community where everyone kind of looks out for you, not necessarily. I mean, I, as a kid, was like, "Oh my God, she's the mean neighbor." But also at one time when I stepped on something and sliced my foot open, Marilyn was the first one to drive me into her house, rinse it all off, take me to the doctor because my mom was working. And so that sense of community is so important. And I know I talk to people that have made the move and the transition. One of the things that they love so much about it is that sense of community that if you're willing to be part of it, that community is just there for you and they want you to be part of it as well.
Absolutely. We're conversational in Spanish, and what we found is Ticos just really appreciate when you try. Like it doesn't matter if you can speak or not. Like they just want you to try and to kind of take part in the community. So if you just go to Minnesota, like everyone loves it. If you We've been invited over to people's houses and just for coffee or food. Everyone's really generous with their plant matter. So we live in kind of a jungle and everyone has these beautiful plants. And I'll be walking the dogs and farmer will be like, "Oh, come here." And then they'll like give me some cuttings. It's
Nice.
really like a wonderful feeling.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about this because we've kind of brushed over it a little bit, but we had a baby in Costa Rica. What was that like?
Yes, we did. Well, I would say pregnancy. Like if you've got through it,
4 out of
no matter where you are, that's a tough one. But in terms of the birth experience, so we gave birth in San Jose in SEMA, which is one of the biggest hospitals in the country. And the experience was great there.
Nice.
Had a wonderful doctor, hired a doula who was with us throughout the entire thing. It went very smoothly overall, was really happy with all the medical care leading up to that and during. And it was much more affordable as well than what we would have expected in the United States. So that was great. Yeah.
Interesting note for listeners. So there's a number of residency options, obviously, for Costa Rica. If you have a baby in Costa Rica, you get to skip those temporary residencies and you're automatically a permanent resident through the birth of your child. And your child is automatically a dual citizen.
Nice.
So we have a little Tika in the house.
Yeah, we have Tika. And we're waiting for our permanent residency.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what is her name?
Her name is Luisa.
Luisa.
It was important to us to choose a name that worked in English and also in Spanish.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. That's awesome. And do we plan on growing the family while we're there, or we're good with one?
We have 2 dogs.
That's a conversation that is going to happen later, probably.
I think we're taking a
Well, it's one of those things too. It's like everyone's like going, "Well, how many do you want to have?" Honestly, it's funny that I even asked that because most of the time, I know it's none of my business. I have 5 kids. I'm like going, and I've always told my kids, I'm like, look, don't feel like you have to have kids because you need to fulfill me with grandkids because you don't. I want you guys to be happy in your relationships. And if at some point in your life you go, I just will not feel fulfilled until we add one more person to our family, that's when you should do it, is when you can't visualize your life without them. And then add them.
It's a nice way to think about it. Well, I think it's really hard in the US right now. So a lot of kind of our cohort are really struggling with the decision. And some people would want kids, but it's just too expensive.
Yeah.
And so part of our rationale continuing to live abroad is, we can afford to have a family. We have a nanny who allows us both to work, which is really important. And I think in the US it would just be much more difficult.
I think so too. So speaking of the US, how often do you guys make it back?
Typically, we've been living outside of the US now, both of us, for 12 years or so. So I'd say in the past, the typical was about 2 times a year. Since having a baby who's currently 8 months old, less than that. But
we're getting a lot of visitors.
Yeah, we have gotten a lot of visitors.
I bet. Grandparents coming in to see that baby.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I love it.
And what a visit while seeing your grandchild.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And you guys are in such a beautiful part of the country too. So let's talk about then, Start Abroad. Tell me about it. Like, why did we start this company?
Yeah, so my background's in international HR. I had worked for large international NGOs and also tech startups working across 20 plus countries. And so had this experience of relocating employees internationally, settling them in mostly, Americans, Europeans, Canadians, settling them into countries all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
When we were thinking about making this last move, we wanted to have the same type of support that we were used to from larger international companies, right? This kind of all-encompassing, I'm going to help you figure this out, we're going to set it all up for you type support. We realized that didn't really exist for people who are doing it on their own, for your digital nomads, for your retirees. Sure. And so, we thought, given my background, given Zach's experience in operations, that, we could do that business quite well ourselves.
Yeah, we can help people.
Yeah.
And the way that we think about it is, you get to move to Costa Rica. This should be one of the most exciting times of your life. And instead, it can quickly become really stressful and overwhelming because there's a million things to figure out. There's a lot of really good information online. There's a lot of bad information online. There's a lot of bad actors. And so what should be this really experience can quickly become like kind of a negative, stressful quagmire. And what we wanted to do was just help people do it right the first time, take that stress off of their plate so that they could be excited about going to Costa Rica. And, just from a personal perspective, when I was 23, I would make these moves on my own and just say, I'll figure it out because I didn't care. And now, I'm older. I have a little more discretionary income. I'd much rather just pay somebody to like make it smooth. Like I don't want to have to 50 to 100 of my own hours into trying to figure it out only to make an expensive mistake. So we thought that we could.
One of the things I even noticed on your website, like people don't even understand the service levels that go all the way down to, helping people buy a car, right? Like that is in most of the forums that are in the Facebook groups, whatever, they're like, I mean, that's probably, I'd say one of the number one questions is, how do you buy a used car in Costa Rica? How do you know who to trust, who not to trust, all of those things. And so when I was reading through your website, that was so interesting. All of the work that you do ahead of time to give them the options. I mean, even with something as simple as that.
It sounds like it would be simple, doesn't it? Buying a car. It turns out there are a lot of components to that can get a little bit difficult in Costa Rica. So it is one of our most popular services.
It's funny because we're just used to the way that things work in the US. Mm-hmm. And the US is just geared towards efficiency into like helping people spend money easily.
Yeah.
And countries are not that way. And like Costa Rica is not that way. It's like one of the things that people love about Costa Rica is Pura Vida, which is great, which is like a wonderful from like the health of your soul perspective. Mm-hmm. It's not good for like things that. And like buying a car, it's kind of the Wild West, and there's a lot of people who take advantage of you. There's a lot of shenanigans in the car market. There's like certain legal processes you need to know, and it's really hard to have full visibility into that before you've come and like understand the culture and speak a little Spanish. And so we've designed a service that help people avoid buying that lemon, or where they've painted over the rust and rolled back the odometer. There's no such thing as Carfax. And so, like, how do you understand the value of what you're getting? And so it's like services like that, where it's a lot more complicated than people would think or be used to.
Well, we're used to in the U.S. that there are regulations in place that are always about protecting the consumer. And so we don't understand, because we've grown up in that everything is to protect the consumer, that we have rights, by God, whenever someone, does something untoward or unscrupulous or has bad business practices. There's a Better Business Bureau, there's the Attorney General, there's all the places that you can go to get some sort of remediation. And in Costa Rica, you're right, it is the Wild Wild West. Like, it is buyer beware. It is, please have enough knowledge to do this. Don't come in with your Western mentality of buying a vehicle how you know it is, and then expecting that everyone is going to do business the way that you're used to doing it. And like, I had to learn the entire process. I bought a vehicle from some Canadian who drove it from Canada, and it was a beast of a vehicle. It was a 1983 Toyota Land Rover, and it was rusted out. I knew what I was buying, but it was 4-wheel drive. It would get where I needed to go. But like, all of the rubber was rotten. He had used caulk to caulk around the windows to keep the rain out. It didn't always work. Mm-hmm. The door jambs would fill up with water because the rubbers where you rolled the window up and down were rotten. So I had to drill holes in the bottom so the water could drain out. I mean, it was craziness. But that wasn't even the best part. Was like, okay, now I've bought it. Now I have to go to an attorney to do the paperwork, which that wasn't normal, right? To have an attorney do that portion of it. And then I had to, make sure that I got the title and registration stuff right. Like, I had to know the guy to go to do the inspection, to give me the crap I needed. And that was all just, there was at that time when I bought that in probably 2017, like, there wasn't somebody that I could just go to like you guys and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please make this easier for me. I just kind of had to fumble through the entire thing and be frustrated with it. So it's so nice that even that simple of a transaction that we think should be a simple transaction, and it isn't, but that there are people who can navigate that for you and make that a bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want when you're working on settling into a new country with a new culture and a new language is to also have to learn an entire new bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm. And find a mechanic. that will be on.
Yeah, that you can trust. With and
Absolutely. Okay, so that is one of your like smaller services that you offer, and it's not just for Costa Rica. If they want to move to where? I mean, if a U.S. or a Canadian citizen want to move to where will you help them?
Yeah, so we also offer services in Portugal and Panama, and we are expanding into Spain at the end of this year. So we'll be offering that at the beginning of next year.
Currently taking beta clients, if anyone's interested.
Yeah.
Beta clients. Okay. And so then what does that look like? Like, how do you like make all of the connections that are necessary and learn like the different cultures? Like in Panama, it has to be a bit different than Costa Rica. How do you find those connections? How do you like just make friends with people and know that they're going to be a good fit for your service?
Yeah, it's a lot of work to try and figure out the right partnerships on the ground to be able to execute all of these services. So I'll say some of it comes from trying things out ourselves, from working with beta clients, from just a lot of ongoing conversations and visits and listening to people who have worked with those partners before.
We have a vetting process for partners. It includes, speaking with past clients, making sure that you're a legitimate company, a lot of conversations ourselves, do some undercover investigative work. So we have a whole process, and then there's always a little bit of trial and error, which is why we always do beta testing first. Which is, there's some people who will get the job done, but not necessarily value things like communication in the way that we expect in the U.S. or Canada. Right? So we want to be communicated with, we want transparency, and some countries just don't value that as much. And so we're always looking for partners that will meet that.
Prioritize
standard.
Customer service.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's probably the hardest thing is that communication level, because when you're making a move that big, over communicating is so important. The fact that you're not sitting here wondering, they're communicating with you every step of the way. And I think that even pointing that out, that the communication piece is one of the most paramount pieces of it. Lets me know that you guys have got that dialed in, because that's where all the fear comes in, and the anxiety is in the not knowing what's going on, where are we at in the process, what do you need from me? This is a kind of a weird relationship to it, but I am building an app right now, and my app developer that I was working with, I would be like constantly just trying to get like an update from him. Like I would be hitting him up. I'd see him reading my messages in Skype. I would see him reading my messages in Slack that he had read them, and then nothing back. And finally I was like, can we get, and he only lived like 2 hours from me. So I could have gotten in. I even offered to get in the car and drive to him, and we could have a sit down meeting. And he's like, you can drive here if you want to. It doesn't mean I'm going to meet with you. And I was like, what the crap? And so finally I was like, I really am struggling with this communication piece. And he goes, you need to assume that if I'm not talking to you, I'm doing what I'm getting paid to do, which is working. And I'm like, yeah, I'm never going to make that assumption. No, I'm never going to make that assumption. And I terminated that agreement because we weren't on the same communication level. I had anxiety constantly about, is anything moving forward? And now I have a really great team that communicates with me on the scheduled timeframes that we've laid out. And it makes my life so much less stressful. So I can imagine in the whole relocating, sometimes people's whole families, like their husband, wife, and I have some friends that like moved 5 kids, teenagers all the way down to like 3-year-olds. And I can imagine how much communication has to happen to make that as seamless as possible as well. So good job.
One of the ways to
mentioning that.
Oh, thanks. One of the ways to think about it too is there's obviously the logistical piece. So there's what documents do I need for my visa? What are the legal processes of the car purchase? Mm-hmm. There's also the emotional piece, which is, I think, arguably more taxing for a lot of people. And so you're making a huge move, like you said, often with your family. And what can we do as relocators that kind of help you manage that? And a lot of that is just being in touch, getting to know you personally, you getting to know us personally. And so that's one of the things that separates us, I think, in this business is we're very hands-on. We're very available, and it's so that people feel better about this decision they're making, because
Yeah.
It's a tough move.
And so when you have a random question about, oh my gosh, I just realized, what about a P.O. box in Costa Rica? Can I get something like that? You can ask somebody these
Right.
questions, and you can not have all of these unanswered stressors.
For our concierge clients, you had asked about different kind of service levels. So we do like the car purchase, visa, and then we also have these bundles, which are a higher level of service. And for our concierge level clients, they have our WhatsApp numbers. And so, we're available during business hours. They can just shoot us a question. We can hop on a call. And yeah, we find that people really respond positively.
I love that. I love that. So this, not to point anything out negative, but what is one of the most catastrophic things that have happened since you guys started this business? Like we lost an entire container, or got a car and it was, there's got to be some horror stories.
So the tricky thing about working in all these countries is that governments can change the rules literally in a day, and sometimes don't give notice about the changes, which can catch a lot of people unawares and lead to some roadblocks in your process. We had a policy change in Portugal affect a very large number of clients. And the change was that up till the end of last year, Portugal had this really great tax scheme for expats who hadn't lived there within the past 5 years. It was, no taxation on foreign income for 10 years, special tax rules. It was super attractive. Lots of people wanted to come to Portugal as a result. They changed the rule, and they changed it with so little notice
or information
that people didn't know if they were still going to be able to qualify. They didn't know, given their timelines, you're planning this probably 6 months out, a year out, that they realized that they weren't going to be able to get to Portugal in time. All of a sudden it was like a mad rush to see, well, maybe I can move in a month and maybe then I can qualify. And this, is including finding a home and getting a visa in that time.
You also had to have your appointment. So you used to do it at this one office, and as part of this, they switched which office you had to do it in, and you couldn't get appointments at this new office. Administratively, it wasn't set up well. And so while everyone's freaking out about trying to do this in time, you also couldn't do it. And so
because they had just changed the government entity that handles immigration matters. So things like this happen all the time when you're dealing with bureaucracy.
Right.
We had another example in Costa Rica. A lot of the things that we do are in the hands of immigration authorities or shipping authorities or whatever. And so it's a little out of our control. And so one of the things that we do in Costa Rica is help with digital nomad visas. We've gotten very good at them. We've helped hundreds of people get them. But, sometimes the agent reviewing it can reject it and give you no information, or it can be an incorrect judgment. So we had somebody who had all the right documents, and they just said, oh, you didn't have this one document. And there's very little recourse. And so then the client's kind of understandably anxious. We are going to the immigration office, we're emailing, we're calling, and they're always sending you to somebody else, or just not picking you up.
To try to make it not your problem.
And so we, when you're working with these bureaucratic institutions, these things can happen, and we're the go-between between the client and the institution. And so we're trying to manage the client and trying to get a resolution. So those things are, I wouldn't say common, but not as infrequent as
we would hope.
At least, though, for our clients, they have somebody who can help them manage it.
And I think the digital nomad visa is kind of a new thing, I think, since COVID. Really, I don't think that was something that was even offered beforehand. So for people who don't understand, what you have to do to qualify for that, can you guys enlighten them on that a little bit?
Sure. So the basic requirement is if you're coming on your own, you have to demonstrate that you've made at least $3,000 per month over the past 12 months. There's a few other things, like you need a certified income statement from a Costa Rican accountant. If you're coming with any dependents, it needs to be $4,000 per month over the past 12 months. It's all fairly straightforward, but the way that the system has been implemented, it's pretty tricky, actually. And so I'm happy to get on the phone with somebody on a free consultation if they want to know more.
The timeline for getting a visa, a digital nomad visa, is usually about
2 months.
2 months.
2 to 3 months.
As compared to the temporary residencies, which at this point are a bit backlogged in Costa Rica.
And very expensive. So getting a digital nomad visa with us, maybe the whole thing is $1,100, $1,200. If you're going to do a temporary residency, you're talking $2,500, $3,000. So, and it's going to take 12 months as opposed to 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Between legal fees, government, etc.
Yeah.
And for the digital nomad visa, like how long is that good for? Is it every year you have to get it?
It's good for a year, and you can renew for a second year. So it's really good for young families that want to spend a year abroad or 2 years abroad. It's good for people who aren't sure that Costa Rica is it yet, and want to just test it out for a while. It's good for people kind of passing through for a year. So it makes sense for a lot of people.
So when they get a digital nomad visa, they don't have to do a border run every 180 days?
That's the real advantage. So as probably a lot of people know, you can come to Costa Rica on a tourist visa, which they've extended now to be good for 180 days, although you don't always get 180 days. It's actually up to the agent that processes you through customs. Right. Don't just assume you have 180 days. Check the visa they put in your passport.
Right.
But you can come on a tourist visa, but you still have to make border runs. You have to leave in order to be able to drive when your visa expires. So the digital nomad visa is good if you need to show your employer, hey, I have legal status. There's some tax benefits, and then also you don't have to make these border runs.
Interesting. And I had heard from somebody, I don't remember who, that like even though you may have the 180-day visa stamp in your passport, that you can't drive for 180 days. You only drive for like 90. Did they change that?
They've changed that recently. Well, it was, I think the law had passed, but then in Costa Rica, the way that it works is what the law isn't always how it's implemented. So right. That's in process right now. And
okay.
It would depend on the person who pulls you over on it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's on anything, just about.
So the digital nomad visa kind of provides that peace of mind.
Yeah. So what is something that when you guys moved there that you thought it would be super difficult and it ended up being easier than you thought it would be?
Yeah, probably just finding our community and friends. When we were doing this 5-week tour all around the country, we decided that Nuevo Arenal, where we are now, had the highest ceiling. Like we could see the most potential and amazing life here, but also the lowest floor because we had no idea if we'd be able to find friends. It seemed like a really small town, kind of rural. The lake was beautiful, but we just didn't know if there was community here. So that's why we also tried it for a month and then for 6 months and then for a year. And, we committed at a certain point. But yeah, it was honestly our first week after having decided to try it for a month. We were in the parking lot of the grocery store. There was a guy who was going to the grocery store as we were getting out of our car, and he looked pretty buff.
He's a fit dude.
Yeah. This Costa Rican guy, and Zach, is looking for friends, very actively looking for friends, and just said to him in Spanish, like, oh, like, where do you work out? And it was the right thing to say. And as a friend pickup line in this case.
I threw him a friend pickup line.
His name is Franco. He ended up introducing us to everybody.
We got invited to a party the next day.
He's like one of our closest friends here. We have just based on that interaction, it's wild.
We have what we really feel very fortunate about is we have a really nice blend of expat and Eco friends, which really just enriches the experience, makes us part of the community. So we were worried about that. When you move, if you were to move to a different city in the U.S., you don't know people. You have to make a whole new community. When you move to a new country, that's doubly true. And so we were a little worried about that, especially because we wanted to start a family, and especially because we are working so much. And it's kind of immediately we developed a really wonderful community.
I love it. And so then on the opposite side of that, what is something that you thought this is going to be easy? We won't have any of these challenges whatsoever. And it was really kind of a pain in the rear.
What did I say?
You had a really good answer before. What was a good answer? Not visa stuff.
No,
not car stuff. Mold.
Well, that does drive me absolutely crazy.
mold.
We live in the rainforest.
Yeah.
I go to war with all wood surfaces with a bottle of vinegar on a regular basis.
I'll like wake up and there's like a squirting sound, and it's Anna with her little vinegar spray bottle, just like
That's funny.
looking at the mold. I think also
There's a better answer here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wait, let's just give us 1 second to.
You're fine.
We had it.
I can tell you what. I can tell you
Yeah.
what 90% of everybody says.
Right.
Yeah.
It's banking.
Yeah. Banking. Well, yeah. Banking, because we just use like Wise, and we have certain debit and credit cards, so to kind of minimize foreign transaction fees. I'll say we bought a house, and we had contract. Oh no, long-term rentals.
Oh yes.
Okay,
Gosh,
so we're gonna like.
so difficult.
Okay.
Yeah. So
4320.
Better than we expected. When we decided on Nuevo Arenal, we wanted to rent short term just to make sure it was the right place. And the challenge was there's very few long term rentals. And because of that, they're really expensive and like not great quality. So what you'll see in a lot of places, especially places that are more expat and tourist heavy, is a lot of Airbnbs, but it's not as attractive then for the owners to rent long term. There's also really strong rentee protections. And so there's a lot of owners that don't want somebody in their home long term. So there's just not a lot of options, especially in this area because it is a very small town, very remote. We really struggled to find a long-term rental to the point that we almost thought we were going to have to leave if we couldn't find a home to buy, just because we couldn't find anything within our price range that was like, that's it. And so we were actually lucky then to find a home that we wanted to buy that was in our price range, because otherwise we might have had to leave this area.
Yeah, go to the other side of the lake, or that's.
And there's also like not really like if you sign a lease, it's not actually legally binding in some cases. So the rental market here is.
In order to be legally binding, you need to be signing a lease for a 3-year lease term in Costa Rica. That's what's required under the law. So.
Because the landlord can't get you to leave the house for 3 years, technically.
Yes, that's what we mean when we talk about protections for the rentee, is that you can't be kicked out because you're paying for 3 years by your landlord. So it is very generous to the renter.
I see that. And it's funny because in Golfito, it's kind of the same. There's hardly any Airbnbs down there right now because it's just not a touristy area. It's really transactional around duty free. People come in and stay, whatever. But and then long-term rentals, there's like freaking nothing.
Yeah, it's really difficult because I think the best piece of advice we can give people is to spend time in a place before you buy. Because it's typically easy to buy, hard to sell. And a lot of people have this dream. They want on vacation to a beach in Costa Rica for 5 days, and they say, well, I want this, so I'm going to buy a house on the beach. But that doesn't mean that place is right for you to live.
Yeah.
And so the advice we can give people is go spend time in a few different places, try to rent before you buy if you're able to. But that's difficult because there's not a lot of affordable long-term rentals. So I think that was a challenge we didn't really anticipate.
And really, the way to get around that and solve that issue is typically to just work through local networks. It's difficult to find things, especially if you're just using, like an Airbnb type site to find places the price.
For sure.
So knowing Spanish, being able to reach out to people within the community to ask who they know might be renting their home, that's really valuable.
Also, something to think about is availability and prices change dramatically during the high season and the low season. So the high season is typically kind of like end of October through Easter. And so prices are going to sometimes double, but often they'll be at least a third higher, and inventory is going to be way lower because Costa Rica really fills up. And so looking for a long-term rental outside of that window will give you more options.
Yeah, I understand. And we've done the same thing. Like whenever the first place that we leased long-term, we leased a place for a year in Uvita. And I literally found it by popping into a Facebook group going, where do I start? And that was I think that was 2016. And then this lady who has become a good friend of mine since then, it was like, hey, there's a place on my mountain. I think they were in Escalares. There's a place on our mountain, and they are full-time in Florida. They're not here, and they're really not going to be back here for probably another 18 months, and would love to lease it out for a year. And I was like, fantastic. And I was only there, honestly, probably once every 6 weeks, once every 5 to 6 weeks, I would be there. And they're funny all the time. They were like, hey, we have some friends coming in. Would you like to sublease it to them while they're? I'm like, no. No. I'm coming in, no. Like, I don't want, no, like, I have all my crap there. Not that anybody would mess with it. I'm sure their friends wouldn't either, but I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. And I leased it for this time period so that I didn't have to share it with anybody. And if I'm not there for 2 months, that's my business. I paid my bill, I pay my rent, I pay my electric, I pay my internet, all of that was good. But it was a really great place. I loved having it there, and was sad to give it up at the end. And I think they just recently sold it. They sold it and moved up into the country somewhere, because they finally did move full-time to Costa Rica. And he used to do landscaping for all of the Disney properties in Florida. He was a landscape engineer. Yeah, so like he brought that business to Costa Rica. So now for expats or for developments or whatever that are going in, he'll go in and do all the landscape engineering for them, and what should be planted here, what should grow here, what will stop erosion, all of that stuff. So it's pretty cool.
That's very important in Costa Rica with the earthquakes in the hills. That's great.
100%. Well, what is one thing that you want everybody to know before we wrap this up? We're going to put all of the links where you can contact them at Start Abroad, so that you can, if you're watching this, you're considering making a move to Costa Rica, or you already have, and maybe you're in Costa Rica and there's still some services that they offer that will help you guys. I mean, if you look through their website, it's amazing. I spent some time just noodling around there, and then I shared it with Beverly and Franz and Brian so that they could look around and go, look, these are great services. We're probably going to need this stuff too. But I'll put all the links to that. But what is something that you want people to know that we haven't covered?
Well, I'd say, for a lot of people who are listening, I think moving abroad and moving to Costa Rica is often a dream. And often people feel like it's something that other people do, and it's not an option for them. And what I'd say is, no two moves are the same. There's no boilerplate. And there are going to be legitimate barriers or like obstacles that you're going to need to overcome in order to make the move. But they're all overcomable, depending on your context. But almost always there's things that they can be managed, and that you can do it. And people like us are here to tell you that and also help you do it. And so if it's something you truly want to do, it's achievable.
And if you want to talk to us about your circumstances, we offer free 15-minute consultations, and you can sign up on our website, startabroad.com.
We're also happy to offer listeners of this podcast a 5% discount on any of our services. And so we'll include that link, the code, in the description.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys' time. As interesting as this is, like I was literally taking notes. So if you guys see me down, like taking notes, even though I took notes when we spoke the first time, I'm like, okay, right here, this was important. So subscribe to this podcast, download it, share it, do all of the things. Those are with anybody that you know that is wanting to even talk about considering moving to Costa Rica. By all means, we do this so that we can get as much good information to people as possible that you may not be getting in a Facebook group or on a forum somewhere whenever all the grouchy people are logged on for the day and they're just wanting to be snarky. We're just trying to provide some good, honest, hey, we did this. This is how we did it. And now we're helping others do it. That's fantastic. And we just want everybody to know that this is a wonderful place if you're considering relocating. It has warts and bumps just like every other country. And it has so much beautiful, charming personality, and the people are the friendliest people I've ever met in my life. Like the Ticos and Ticas are the friendliest people I've ever met on this earth, and I've traveled extensively. And that's probably what draws me to Costa Rica. And when I land, every time I land and I come there, I was like, I'm home. And I felt like that whenever you guys started driving into Arnall, and you're like, oh, that's how I feel like whenever I even land in San Jose and I got all the crazy cabbies there driving you crazy. Like, I'm still like, I know all these people, doesn't matter. I'm home. I'm good. So you need help navigating. Start Abroad is probably a good place to start for you guys. And all the links will be down below. And Zach and Anna, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Robin.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.